I try my best to, and I say try my best to because I fail at this, to not take myself so seriously. Because at the end of the day, I feel like this is all just one big game. And this very much feels like a playground, right? And so when you're at the playground, you find kids to play with and you guys invent some game. You guys take it kind of seriously enough to where, you establish rules, you establish roles, and you all know you're going to go home, but you build the sandcastle anyways.
Hmm.
And so I like to remember that this is all a game and it was made by people who are just like you and I, and we can really have a profound impact.
Welcome to Artificial Insights, where we interview product leaders and thinkers in AI about what it means to do AI right. I'm your host, Daniel Maneri, and this week we're doing a back to school special where we're talking to young people early in their careers to see what they're doing with AI. Today, we're joined by Aleks Santari. Aleks is a student at Johns Hopkins University, and he's working on 3 separate projects. One is a snake-like surgical robot for eye surgery with a lab at Johns Hopkins. And the other 2 are apps that he's doing on his own. One, called Flow, is a health-focused one to let people ask questions like, how am I doing, and get contextual responses. And another is an autonomous rover to learn the way that autonomous systems behave. Aleks, let me start off with a question that I like to ask everyone,
Sure,
because
sure.
I think with a podcast like this, there's a question on everyone's minds, and it's, Aleks, are you an AI?
um, that's a good question. And right before this, I actually went through one of your clips where you were talking with your AI. What would you your persona, your AI persona?
Voice double.
And to some extent, yes, I am an AI. And what I mean by that is that, I regardless of the situation, you end up putting on some sort of mask and you do try to predict what the person would want to hear and you kind of end up saying that. Does that mean that it's not real? No, that's a hard question. I think it's probably easier if I just say no, I'm not an AI, and I'm glad for that. Just because when I really start to see how these tools are being used, it's really exciting, but it's also a little concerning. Like, I don't know if you've been on Reddit recently, or if you spend any time on Reddit. I hope not as much as I have been these days. But I'm sure you've seen or maybe you haven't seen like the outcry with the release of GPT-5.
A little, yeah.
And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Can you tell me what you've seen?
So at least something that's concerning with me, and it's really making me think about like how I actually end up wanting to build AI into my products is I feel like a lot of people are getting this impression that they've lost a friend.
Mm,
And that scares me because I mean, I know just even thinking of how I've used AI over the last 4 months, I have a whole project dedicated to essentially this life coach where AI is essentially helping me optimize my lifestyle and even go through some, I guess you could say, pretty personal stuff. And so it turns out a lot of us are doing this, and I think that's a good thing, right? Because it's an incredible listener, right? And when you're looking for people to listen to you, you would hope that they can sort of capture this underlying feature essence of what you're saying, so it can feel really good. And it was just kind of concerning to see how many people felt like they had lost somebody. And
mm.
so that's kind of how I like how you started with your first question. I hope it doesn't get to that point where I answer yes, I am an AI, because we'll be in big trouble at that point if we're not already.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I found it difficult to understand why everybody was upset about GPT-5. Sure, it's different. Sure, it has quirks. But like anything else, if it was software, you just get used to the new upgrade. But it's like people aren't treating it like software. They're treating it like a friend.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I would kind of hope that, at the end of the day, we're trying our best here, right? When we make these new technologies, we don't exactly know how they're going to impact us. I mean, no one could have predicted how the internet would ultimately unfold and social media and the impact of that as well. But I feel like we're mature enough with these technologies where we can hopefully not make the same mistakes, or at least really think about what we want out of AI, right? Because we've all seen the movies, and I think it's fun to think about how AI ultimately becomes conscious and kills us all. But at the same time, that it probably won't happen. If I'm completely honest, we are quite an incredible species, and given that we'll survive, there's a lot of opportunity to dream about the type of future we really want to see with this technology. What do we want it to do for us? We're still in a position where we can very much steer. And so I get excited when people tell me that their hope is that AI will lead to us using our devices less and less, rather than
Mm.
necessarily augment away all of our personal relationships.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. It's not a fun future if we're all stuck in little bubbles with AI. I feel like I need to take one step back and ask you, Alex, could you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Most definitely. That's a very important question, give some context to the conversation. Yeah, I'm a student, computer engineer. I feel I'm a builder by heart over at Johns Hopkins. Simple terms, I just like working on cool things with cool people. And that just happens to be the coolest toys. So robotics, surgical robotics, building applications, things like this. I mean, I can go on and on about, all these different definitions and titles, but I think that like I said, really going back to this, at the end of the day, I really do see this as a playground. And I think of myself as a philosopher. I think by temperament, may or may not be obvious already, I tend to think very deeply on some of these topics. And so I get excited about these types of conversations. And so, yeah, I'm a builder and I'm a thinker.
Yeah, I really enjoy having those two approaches put together because I think it makes for the best experience when you use something.
I really do agree, just because I see user interfaces as almost like a form of modern art, right? You think about it, like someone obviously had an idea for a good product and they were able to engineer it, but part of it had to be sitting down and basically putting on their empathy hat and thinking, how is somebody going to use this product and how can we make sure they have a good experience? That seems like a pretty positive frame to be. It's like you want people to have a good time. That's valid and beautiful, and it's led to some of the best products I would say we've seen so far in the 21st century. The creation of the iPhone and multi-touch and all these user interfaces, right? They're so easy to use. My little brother from the time he was 3 was able to use it better than my mom. And so that's the beauty of these things, is that when they're built really well, they become extremely accessible to
Yeah.
vast amounts of people. And I guess
Yeah.
that's a pretty good thing to aim at.
Yeah. It's much better than the alternative of using empathy to figure out how to like twist someone's thumbs a little bit and make them do what you want.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that becomes a bit of concern with what we're doing right now. I was a bit upset at seeing the release of Annie. I don't know if you ever saw that on X.
No, go ahead.
No, so it's essentially this, I mean, you know, trying to keep this PG-13 here, but it's essentially an AI girlfriend dressed in lingerie
Huh.
that's a wrapper on top of Grok, released by X. He made Grok rise to the top of the App Store in Japan, funny
Wow.
enough, within 24 hours. And I was
Wow.
a bit sad because, I love people and I think there should be more people. And, I see products like this. I'm like, okay, we're kind of pulling a generation back of having less kids. There's enough sources of degenerate stimulus out here. So it's really funny. We haven't really talked about like the kind of things I'm working on, but to say in like 2 words, I'm essentially working on executive assistant, right? Who isn't, right? How to make
Mhm.
AI more useful to you. And I used to talk about it as if like, oh, imagine as if your best friend was right here and he knew all this context around you and could, help make decisions for you. And I've backtracked from that
Mm.
because I'm very much in the position now where I'm like, okay, like, no, AI is not your friend. This is a computer. And it's really funny how we have to say this out loud because
Yeah.
the way things are naturally or unnaturally going. I'm curious, honestly, how you see the state of UI. Like, how do you use AI? How do the people around you use AI? I mean, I'm
Mm.
mainly talking about large language models, but AI is a lot more than just obviously language models. And given your background, right? I was looking at you went to Waterloo, I believe, and was it mathematical physics?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's intense. So, like, please tell me, like, what is your story? How did you end up here?
yeah, it's been fascinating watching people have AI come into the mainstream since I actually went into mathematical physics because at the time AI was boring. And I was like, I want to do AI, cool stuff. And they're like, look, handwriting recognition. I was like, nah, that's not cool. It's not a fun problem. And so I went to math and physics instead. And now that AI can process text and images and sound and give you something that looks like a conversation, It can say, I've read the whole internet. Here's probably what a person would say to this response. It just feels like magic. And to see that transition has been, I mean, I'm a late adopter of technology, actually. I wait until people are like, here's what you can do with it and why you should care, until I usually try and make it work in my life. And I've seen so many people who I thought were later adopters than me and not that eager jump on, start talking to it, use it for writing. And I've seen so many people whose writing I respected suddenly become homogenous, actually, and one sentence on LinkedIn, one sentence, one sentence, one sentence, one sentence, and it gets tiring. So I see
Right.
this like pervasion of pretty much for everywhere that I see people interacting with information now. And and I don't know. I feel like there's so much more to it than that. The uses that people keep talking about are like I'm talking to it as a friend. I'm using it for
Mhm.
therapy, or I'm using it to talk to a book or my documents or things like that. And it's a lot of text processing. And that can
Right.
be really good, or it can be I have a pretend girlfriend.
Yeah.
So I want to see what people are doing with AI and understand A, what matters, and then B, what will stand the test of time. What is it? Why are we using it? And how are we doing that? And the way to do that is to talk to everybody who's doing meaningful things with AI.
No, I get that.
It's been a year, actually, as of, I think the end of this month. So it's been very cool to just meet awesome people like yourself and then to see the stuff that people are doing that's new. And the ideas of one idea that I didn't expect at all was that you won't have APIs anymore. And I talked to people who said that before Model Context Protocol was popular, and now it's here. And
Can you elaborate on that?
sure, yeah, I think, for example, I'm thinking of one guy I interviewed, Bijan Veyes, and he built a software to help manage catalogs of millions of e-commerce items. And when you do that, you have to update information, and you have no way to do millions of items manually or even programmatically sometimes. So it takes real intelligence. And because of this model context protocol or something like it, he might have been earlier than that, he's able to say, here's how you talk about items, here's how you get information from this software, and then here's how you put information over here, all in natural language. So it's not like building coding APIs and then I need to create something over here, I need to delete something over here, and teaching it how to code. You're just doing it in natural language. And to me, that's actually one of the more exciting things that you mentioned accessibility. And I think if we could use computers with natural language, if we could use websites with natural language, if we could use the desktop with natural language, you could do so much more. And then potentially you could do that younger and faster and better. So I find natural language interfaces very exciting.
So you're really speaking my language because that's where I would really like AI to move as well. Have you ever heard of this series called Foundation?
Yes. Yeah, based on the Asimov series.
Correct, correct. Do you watch it?
Yes, we watch. There's only two seasons out when we watched it, I think, but we watched them both.
You watching? Okay. Do you remember the scene where I forgot one of the leads? She's on the ship and she's talking to the computer. Remember,
The
and it was like
younger
this.
girl, I think.
Yes, the younger girl, and it's this blue three-dimensional cube. And there's this moment that was very reminiscent of GPT where she doesn't have access, right? But just how people
Yeah.
will try to prop GPT to kind of get around its training.
That's.
She basically worked her way around, obviously using voice, to try to figure out where she was and then set a trajectory there. And then just
I remember that.
it was such a beautiful scene. I've seen it. I kid you not. I've seen it 3 times this week
Wow.
because it's honestly what's driving me to build the product I'm building right now.
Hmm.
You know, I can't say I'm the most qualified person. You know, I'm very much apprenticing in computer engineering and AI and everything I need to build this. But that's my dream for the future computer,
Hmm.
right? Where, like you're saying, just by using natural language, you essentially tell it what you need to do. You have enough background information to where you know what functions need to be called, what programs need to be ran, but you tell the computer to do it. And as it's updating, you can continuously prompt and prompt and prompt the computer, essentially augmenting all the stuff that's made similar to the calculator, right? You now in school, when you do a physics exam, there's no numbers on the exam. It's like, did you set up the equation
Yeah.
correctly? Right? And that's what they test you on. So it's your ability to map problems onto other problems
Mm.
and, leave the rest to the computer. And so that's honestly my hope with these interfaces. I can't build this three-dimensional computer from foundation, but my hope is that as these models are able to essentially accumulate your personal context, I hope they can start making decisions for you. I hope that they continue to become this new interface and essentially make it so you don't even have to pick up your phone. Because if there is something I've noticed about my favorite apps, maybe you've noticed this as well or not, there's a lot of cool features on all these apps. Let's just say like Duolingo, right? Very, very popular app. There's only like one or two features I really use, and the rest are just kind of there. And chances are,
Mm.
when you use an app, you might use two features as well, but a different two features. And my friend might use a different two features. And I feel like these apps are essentially trying to build an app for everybody. And so they have to have all these features, but they actually end up cluttering the experience. And so what makes me really excited is to build more dynamic user interfaces where you only see what you need to see at that moment, and then the interface itself changes.
Mm.
And so with Flow, what we're essentially targeting this is with health apps. So this is like my third Apple Watch, right? I keep buying these since Gen 1 and they end up in a drawer. And actually statistically, half of all people stop using them. Even though the algorithms and the information collecting it's quite useful. It's like they're at the point where they can monitor your sleep. I honestly find them quite helpful just to kind of help regulate myself. And I think people do too, but they require an extraordinary amount of effort to look into all these graphs and really dissect what's going on. And when I talk to people, they kind of tell me a similar story about those two features. One guy will tell me, "Oh, I just like my steps." Another guy will tell me, "Oh, I just like my sleep." Another guy will tell me, "Well, he's a marathon runner. We all have that friend who's a marathon runner. And so he needs his stuff really dialed in. But, I'm just getting started. So maybe I just need to know that I ran like for the second time this month." And so what makes me really excited is taking things out of in front of us, because when we look into the future and we already get glimpses of the future by looking at like Apple Vision Pro or the Meta Quest or their project, is it Orion, their smart glasses, right? We're essentially moving towards a world of widgets where you're moving along your day, you get this sort of notification, you do something about it and it leaves. And that takes a lot of resources, and there's a lot of smart people working on that right now. And I think that that's going to require, in some sense, transitional technology. And so that's where we're really trying to approach. It's like, okay, we still have this iPhone, and when it first came out, it was incredible, but now it's kind of lost its taste, right? We're getting kind of sort of the same thing. Maybe 5 years ago, I've been more impressed, but now it's like, all right, like there's not really anything that cool happening, but no one's getting rid of their phones anytime soon. Yes, at some point we'll all wear smart glasses, but my hope is to hopefully journey into the unknown a little bit, do something maybe a little bit more risky with these user interfaces in the hope of giving people a better experience. We believe that it should be as easy to interact with your health by simply asking, how am I doing? Or what's next? And receive a digestible response that's contextualized to you. Because that will mean two very different things. But as you've seen with these models, they have the ability to do this. We have yet to implement the technology. And I'm sure everyone's going to be doing this. I just hope to be part of it, even if
Mm.
just a little piece.
Yeah, I feel like I would call what you described a dynamic user interface,
Most
where,
definitely.
I do want to know sometimes, like, how do I sleep better? And I don't want to have to look at my graphs. Just
Yeah,
tell me.
no, it's like, exactly. It's like you have this data, the algorithms exist. Okay, well, we'll start with me. Maybe I need to stop doom scrolling at. And there's enough information being collected to know that it's like you're actually in bed a certain amount of hours. And if you want to improve your sleep score, you just need to make sure more of those hours are spent sleeping. Maybe in your case, you're a busy guy and you have kids, you're up and going. It's like, all right, maybe you need to stay in bed another 30 minutes, making sure you're getting your 8 hours. But you're right. It should be as easy as just asking the question.
Yeah. And I feel like that is a good lead into what is the project that you're working on now? And if there's more than one, please describe more.
So that's the main one. Honestly, it's like I essentially want to build underlying infrastructure that will allow us to build these dynamic UIs. And we're starting with health, right?
Mm.
So I'll tell you exactly how it works. Essentially, what we have is, and this is actually what a lot of companies like ChatGPT or Cursor do, is we've essentially created these tools, right? That maybe these are tools to answer a variety of questions that our user may have, maybe about their running, about their sleep, other aspects of their health, their lifestyle, their habits. And right now, it is a chat interface where a user can ask this question of, how am I doing? What's next? How was my sleep? How was my last run? And then the model essentially is able to filter through its user context, right? Know if the user is a beginner or a more intermediate runner, has this sort of habit, and essentially use these tools to call various APIs and essentially generate this set of moments, is what we call them.
Mm.
And these moments are essentially composed of visual components and text commentary for the user, and then presents it to the user. This is just something that's done pretty simply through ChatGPT API. It's very much wrapper. And I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then we have our front end, and the hope is to just kind of, again, just really create these dynamic experiences. But yeah, that's essentially what we're doing. And the hope is that by starting with this market, is we essentially get really good at it, and then start moving on to augmenting other tasks, other aspects of your phone. For example, you can start incorporating things like screen time. You can start incorporating things like
Mm.
your calendar, etc. I just want to see what would happen. I don't know if people would like it or not, but it's something that I've been craving. And in fact, I'm being quite selfish with the project because this is something I would really want to use. And I think other people would really want to use it, but there's only one way to find out. Apart from that, I also work in a surgical robotics laboratory here at Johns Hopkins. And in that, I can't speak too much because it's somewhat proprietary, but let's just say I get cool excuses to work with a bunch of cool toys and the hope of making surgery more precise and safer. And then on the side, I can't pull it up because it's right here, but I'm essentially trying to get into autonomous systems in general. Because when I think about the infrastructure for flow, it's essentially an autonomous system. And self-driving cars, it's essentially autonomous systems. Since I'm an apprentice to this, I'm very much just learning about these concepts and things like behavior trees. I'm sure you know all about these things. I know you have some background in autonomous systems yourself. And so my hope is to really just go down this path and then consider the outcome of these products, and to hopefully build something that not only people want to be used, but also what I would want my kids to use, what I would want to use. Because just because you can build something doesn't mean you can. And I'm not saying here I'm trying to decide the fate of all of us, but I think it's fair to go into some of the things we're doing with a sense of responsibility, because we have that privilege now to say, okay, we're not dying, so let's make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a worse spot. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. And I like that framing of what I want my kids to use this. And what are it sounds like there are three projects. What are the names of the three projects that you're doing?
Yeah, so the first one is Flow. Is
Yeah.
basically the Flow app I was telling you about. The second one, it's called the iTuris. It's essentially a microscopic robot, snake-like robot that goes into your eye and performs eye surgery.
Hmm.
That one doesn't necessarily have a name. That's just part of the laboratory I'm from. And then this is just an autonomous rover. I'm just using it as a way to get my hands dirty and really become familiar with an autonomous stack.
Yeah, very cool. And what got you into AI in the first place?
I can't think of a defining moment. I can think of a couple different moments when I thought, wow, this stuff is incredible. I remember using chat. So I dropped out of school at some
Hmm.
point, and then I remember sitting on a couch in the middle of nowhere, which is a super long story about why I dropped out and moved to some hill. But I remember opening up ChatGPT, and it was on the day that it released, because I consider myself an early adopter, right? Anytime something cool, I like to just see what's happening. Just because more times than not, we end up actually using these technologies. And so I think I just love technology. I think it's super cool. And I remember opening up ChatGPT and just ask anything. And I thought instantly, I'm like, wow, this is going to kill search engines, which I couldn't even fathom. And in hindsight, it's a naive thing to say nowadays, because I don't think search engines are actually going anywhere. But I knew instantly at that moment that an entire playing field had just been leveled because I did not anticipate that they were going to get any worse. And I just did, even at the time, GPT sucked at coding. And I'm not saying it's incredible now, but it's pretty good, right? At least for junior level stuff. Even the stuff that I work on in my projects, it's quite good. It's better coder than most people that I know. And I thought to myself, I'm like, wow, anybody who didn't think they had a chance now has a chance. Because that's the interesting about the most interesting thing I think to see about AI is in some sense it's commoditized intelligence.
Yeah.
And the thing about intelligence is that it's been a leading identity, I think, of humanity for the last 200 years.
Yeah.
And by commoditizing it, I think it hurts. It definitely hurts, especially for those in the that identify as intellectuals, aka most university students and those in academia. But at the same time, it offers a lot of opportunity to really discover what it means to be human. Because when we think of what makes us different, sometimes that's the way for us to, in some sense, have some sort of superiority complex over others and each other's ways of life. And I think that's what's been really cool about AI is to see like, wow, like the gap is really closing. What was once a mountain has now collapsed. And it's one of those things where we probably have a couple things that we should have changed, just like, for example, our education system. And because of this, now we have to change, whether we like to or not. And I think that's really exciting because I very much embrace change. So it seems like you do as well. It seems like it makes you excited. And
Yeah.
so I think it was more or less, I don't remember a moment. I remember a feeling, and I still have that feeling. And I don't think it's going away. We're definitely at the point where models aren't necessarily having these major waves of upgrades, but at the same time, what will ultimately end up happening is I think more things will start becoming commodities, and it hopefully globalizes standards of living. That's my hope.
Hmm. Yeah. And with the admission of problems. Because I think, like you mentioned earlier, we build things and then we find out, oh, that's what this results in. That's how it shapes society. Like, I don't think Mark Zuckerberg was like, I want everybody to be addicted to Facebook and that's why I'm going to
Yeah,
make
yeah.
it. Like,
No,
no.
100%, 100%. Yeah, no,
Uh,
it's that is very true.
yeah.
So, anything else you got for me, my guy?
Usually I like to leave
Right.
room at the end and say, is there anything else that you would like to say that you haven't said so far?
I think we had a good conversation. We'll let it come to an end gracefully.
All right. And then if people want to keep up with you and see what you're doing, how can they do that?
Yeah, the best way, honestly, at this point is LinkedIn. I'm actually recording this on my end as well. So my hope
Nice.
is to at some point also produce my own content on YouTube. But yeah, LinkedIn would be the best way to keep up with what I'm working. I tend to try to post at least twice a week. We'll try to push that to every day. And yeah,
Thanks for listening. I made this podcast because I want to be the person at the city gate to talk to every person coming in and out doing great things with AI and find out what and why, and then share the learnings with everyone else. It would mean a lot if you could share the episode with someone that you think would like it. And if you know someone who would be a great person for me to talk to, let me know. Please reach out to me at Daniel Maneri on LinkedIn, or shoot an email to daniel@maneri.house, which is daniel@manary.haus. Thanks for listening.